Ginevra Castellano had perfected the art of being invisible. In her line of work, it was a survival skill. As a financial analyst for one of Chicago's most prestigious consulting firms, she'd spent 3 years cleaning up the messes of men who earned twice her salary and possessed half her competence. She'd learned to present her findings in boardrooms full of expensive suits, deliver bad news without flinching, and never ever let them see her sweat. Tonight, however, invisibility wasn't cooperating. She felt his eyes on her the moment she walked into Sorrentino's. The restaurant was one of those places where reservations required either 6 weeks' notice or the right last name. Ginevra had neither, but her colleague Marcus had insisted on celebrating here after they'd closed the Donovan account. She'd agreed because she was too exhausted to argue and because the pasta was supposed to be exceptional. What Marcus hadn't mentioned was that Sorrentino's was the kind of establishment where Chicago's elite came to see and be seen. The kind of place where power didn't whisper. It simply existed, thick enough to taste. The man watching her from the corner table radiated that power like heat. Ginevra didn't look directly at him. She'd grown up in Boston's North End, in a neighborhood where certain men commanded certain respect, and you learned early not to stare. But peripheral vision was fair game, and hers was excellent. He was probably late 30s, dark hair precisely cut, wearing a suit that made Marcus's look like a rental. 2 men flanked him at the table, but they were clearly satellites to his son. He held a glass of wine with the kind of casual control that suggested he approached everything in life the same way, with absolute certainty of his dominion over it. When his gaze tracked her across the room, something low in her stomach tightened. "This place is incredible," Marcus said, oblivious as he studied the menu. "My brother ate here last month, said the owner has connections all the way to Sicily." "Connections," Ginevra repeated, the word dry on her tongue. "Is that what we're calling it?" Marcus looked up, confused, then followed her meaningful glance around the room. Understanding dawned slowly across his face. "Oh, you think—" "I think the pasta is supposed to be exceptional," she interrupted smoothly. "What are you ordering?" She'd learned that too, growing up. Some things you didn't say aloud, even when everyone knew them to be true. Their waiter appeared with a warmth that seemed genuine rather than professional. He was young, maybe 25, with an easy smile and the kind of charm that probably earned him excellent tips. "Welcome to Sorrentino's," he said, his slight accent placing his origin somewhere near Naples. "I'm Luca. I'll be taking care of you tonight." The word choice made Ginevra's lips twitch. Taking care of them. In this restaurant, in this neighborhood, the phrase carried weight. "First time here?" Luca asked, directing the question at Ginevra. "That obvious?" No, I'd remember you." His smile widened. "Trust me, I'd remember." It was harmless flirtation, the kind Ginevra usually deflected with practiced ease. But tonight, with exhaustion making her edges soft, and 2 glasses of wine from the office still warming her blood, she found herself smiling back. "Smooth," she said. "Does that line work often?" "Only when I mean it." Luca's eyes sparkled with mischief. "The special tonight is osso buco, my nonna's recipe. I promise you've never tasted anything like it." "Your grandmother's recipe," Marcus interjected, clearly trying to reassert himself in the conversation. "Does she work in the kitchen?" "She taught the chef everything he knows," Luca said, but his attention remained on Ginevra. "So? Can I bring you the special, my sweetheart? You won't regret it." The endearment was casual, probably something he called half his female customers. Ginevra opened her mouth to respond, to order something safe and redirect Luca's attention elsewhere. She didn't get the chance. Movement in her peripheral vision, the scrape of a chair against marble, then a presence that seemed to alter the very air pressure in the room. The man from the corner table stood beside theirs, and up close, he was even more imposing than she'd anticipated. Tall enough that she'd have to tilt her head back to meet his eyes if she were standing. Broad-shouldered in a way that suggested the expensive suit hid considerable strength. His face was all sharp angles and controlled intensity, the kind of handsome that came with a warning label. But it was his eyes that held her. Dark, assessing, and currently fixed on Luca, with an expression that made the young waiter go absolutely still. "She's not your sweetheart," the man said. His voice was quiet, almost conversational, but it carried the weight of absolute authority. "She's not your anything." The restaurant hadn't gone silent. That would have been too obvious, too dramatic. But Ginevra felt the shift in attention. The way conversations continued at a slightly lower volume. The way other diners suddenly became very interested in their wine glasses, while tracking the scene from the corners of their eyes. Luca had gone pale. "Signor Vittore, I didn't mean—" "I know what you meant." Vittore's gaze never left the waiter. "You meant to be charming, friendly. Perhaps a little too friendly with a woman who came here to enjoy her dinner in peace." "I apologize," Luca said quickly. "I meant no disrespect." "Then show respect." Vittore's tone didn't rise, didn't sharpen. It didn't need to. "Take her order, bring her food, keep your endearments to yourself." Ginevra found her voice, though it took more effort than it should have. "That's not necessary." Now those dark eyes turned to her, and the full force of his attention was like standing too close to a fire. Intense, consuming, dangerous. "Isn't it?" One dark eyebrow rose slightly. "You seemed uncomfortable." "I seemed fine," she countered, lifting her chin. "I've handled worse than a friendly waiter." Something flickered in his expression. Amusement, maybe, or approval. "I'm sure you have." The way he said it suggested he knew exactly what kind of worse she'd handled. That he'd assessed her in the 30 seconds since approaching their table and drawn conclusions that were probably unnervingly accurate. Marcus cleared his throat. "Look, we don't want any trouble. We're just here for dinner." Vittore glanced at him with the kind of dismissive once-over that made Marcus shrink in his seat. Then his attention returned to Ginevra, and she felt that tightness in her stomach again, sharper this time. "Trouble," he repeated, as if tasting the word. "No, there's no trouble here." He shifted his weight slightly, a movement that somehow made him seem even larger, more present. "But perhaps you'd be more comfortable at a different table. One with a better view. And a waiter who understands boundaries." It wasn't a question. It also wasn't quite a command, though the line between the two seemed thin. "Our table is fine," Ginevra said. "Thank you for your concern, but it's unnecessary." His eyes narrowed slightly. "Unnecessary. That's what I said." A pause. The restaurant seemed to hold its breath. Then Vittore smiled, and it transformed his entire face. Not softening it exactly, but revealing something beneath the control. Something sharp and interested and entirely focused on her. "Dante Vittore," he said, extending his hand. She stared at it for a moment. In Boston, she'd learned that certain names carried weight. Certain families commanded respect through means that had nothing to do with legitimate business. Vittore wasn't a name she recognized, but the way every person in this restaurant was pretending not to watch their interaction told her everything she needed to know. She took his hand anyway. Ginevra Castellano. His grip was firm, warm, and lasted a fraction longer than professionally appropriate. When he released her hand, she felt the absence of his touch like a chill. "Castellano," he repeated. "Boston?" "Originally. North End?" Her eyes narrowed. "Good guess. Not a guess." His smile widened slightly. "You have the look. Smart enough to know when to keep your mouth shut. Stubborn enough not to. That's quite an assessment based on 30 seconds of conversation. I'm good at assessments." He glanced at Marcus, then back to her. "Better than some of the people you work with, I'd imagine." Marcus made a strangled sound. Ginevra bit back a laugh. The osso buco, Dante said, addressing Luca without looking at him. For the lady. Your best wine to accompany it. Whatever her companion wants, make sure it's perfect. Now he did look at the waiter, and his expression left no room for misunderstanding. Exemplary service. Clear? Crystal clear, Signor Vittore. Good. Dante's attention returned to Ginevra, and the intensity of it made her breath catch. Enjoy your dinner, Ginevra Castellano from Boston's North End. I have a feeling we'll be seeing each other again. It wasn't a hope. It was a certainty, delivered with the confidence of a man who made the world arrange itself according to his preferences. He walked back to his table with the same controlled grace he'd approached with, and Ginevra realized her heart was racing. Do you know who that was? Marcus hissed the moment Dante was out of earshot. Someone who takes his restaurant etiquette very seriously? Ginevra. Marcus leaned forward, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. That's Dante Vittore. He owns half the South Side. My brother said he's connected to every major family from here to New York. People don't say no to him. I just did. And he looked at you like... Marcus stopped, shook his head. Never mind. This is insane. We should probably go. But Ginevra didn't want to go. Maybe it was the exhaustion, or the wine, or the way Dante Vittore had looked at her like she was a puzzle he intended to solve. Maybe it was the fact that for the first time in 3 years of making herself invisible, someone had actually seen her. Someone dangerous. Someone powerful. Someone who'd stood up in the middle of a restaurant full of Chicago's elite and declared she wasn't anyone else's anything. The possessiveness of it should have alarmed her. Instead, it had sent heat racing down her spine. We're staying, she said. The pasta is supposed to be exceptional. Marcus stared at her like she'd lost her mind. Maybe she had. From across the restaurant, she felt Dante's gaze on her again. This time, when she glanced in his direction, he raised his wine glass in a small salute. Ginevra raised hers in return, and watched his smile sharpen into something that promised trouble. The kind of trouble she'd spent her whole life learning to avoid. The kind of trouble that, apparently, had just decided to find her anyway. The osso buco was, in fact, exceptional. Ginevra had made it through approximately 4 bites before her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. The wine pairs better with the second course. Trust me. She set down her fork and stared at the screen. Marcus was deep in a monologue about the Donovan account, oblivious. Across the restaurant, Dante Vittore sat with his back to the wall. Of course he did, watching her with undisguised interest. She typed back, "How did you get my number?" The response came immediately. "I own the restaurant." That's not an answer. It's the only one you need. Ginevra's jaw tightened. She should have been outraged, should have been alarmed that a man she'd met 5 minutes ago had somehow acquired her personal information. Instead, she found herself fighting a smile. She typed, "Stalking is illegal in Illinois. So is tax evasion." Yet here we both are, enjoying dinner. This time she did laugh, quickly covering it with a cough when Marcus looked up. "You okay?" he asked. "Fine, just the wine is stronger than I expected." It wasn't the wine making her lightheaded. It was the absurdity of texting with a man who was currently staring at her from 30 feet away, his expression unreadable, but his attention absolute. Her phone buzzed again. "Your colleague is boring you." She didn't respond to that one, mostly because it was true, and she had enough self-awareness to feel guilty about it. When he asks if you want dessert, say yes. The tiramisu is worth staying for. Stop managing my dinner. Stop pretending you don't like it. Ginevra set her phone face down on the table with more force than necessary. She would not be managed. She would not be directed. And she absolutely would not acknowledge the heat spreading through her chest at his presumption. She made it another 10 minutes before her phone buzzed again. "You're thinking about leaving. Don't." This time she did look directly at him. Dante's expression remained neutral, but something in his eyes suggested he was enjoying himself immensely. She typed, "You're not the boss of me. Not yet." The two words landed like a physical touch. Ginevra's breath caught, and she watched Dante's mouth curve slightly, as if he knew exactly what effect he was having. Arrogant, accurate, same thing. Ginevra. Just her name, but the way he wrote it felt intimate, possessive. "Stay for dessert. I promise it'll be worth your time." Marcus was indeed asking for the check when Luca returned. The young waiter moved with considerably more professionalism than before, his earlier flirtation completely absent. "Actually," Ginevra heard herself say, "I'd like to see the dessert menu." Marcus blinked. "You want dessert? You never want dessert." "Tonight I do." Luca's relief was visible. "The tiramisu is exceptional. May I bring you one to share?" "Two," Ginevra said. "We're not sharing." She felt rather than saw Dante's approval from across the room. The tiramisu arrived on delicate porcelain, dusted with cocoa, and accompanied by a small card that Luca placed discreetly beside her plate. Marcus was too busy calculating the tip to notice. The cardstock was heavy, expensive. The handwriting was bold, confident strokes in black ink. "I'd like to take you to dinner. Somewhere we can actually have a conversation without your colleagues' commentary on quarterly reports." Ginevra flipped the card over. On the back, Saturday, 8 o'clock. "I'll send a car." No question mark. No request. Just absolute certainty that she would say yes. She should say no. Should crumple the card and leave it on the table and forget about dark eyes and presumptuous texts and the way her pulse had been racing since the moment Dante Vittore stood up from his table. Instead, she tucked the card into her purse. When she glanced toward the corner table, Dante was gone. The car arrived at 7:55 on Saturday. Ginevra watched from her apartment window as the black sedan pulled up to her building with the kind of precision that suggested the driver had done this before. Probably many times. Probably for many women. The thought should have cooled her interest. It didn't. She'd spent 3 days trying to talk herself out of this. 3 days of rational arguments about powerful men and dangerous connections, and all the reasons why Ginevra Castellano, who'd worked so hard to build a legitimate, respectable life, should not get into a car sent by someone who almost certainly operated outside the law. Then she'd spent 2 hours getting ready anyway. The dress was new. Black, because she wasn't an idiot. You wore black to dinner with a man like Dante Vittore. But it was cut well, fitted in ways that made her feel confident rather than exposed. She'd left her hair down, dark waves falling past her shoulders, and kept her makeup simple except for the red lipstick that felt like armor. Her phone buzzed as she stepped into the elevator. "The driver's name is Paolo. He's been with my family 20 years. You're safe with him." She hadn't asked, hadn't expressed concern, but Dante had anticipated it anyway, and something about that made her chest tight. Paolo turned out to be a man in his 50s, with kind eyes, and the same careful courtesy Luca had displayed after Dante's intervention. He opened the door for her, commented on the pleasant evening weather, and asked if she preferred music or silence for the drive. "Where are we going?" Ginevra asked instead of answering. Paolo's smile was gentle. "Signor Vittore thought you might ask that. He said to tell you. Somewhere without colleagues or waiters who don't know boundaries." "That's not an answer." "No, signorina, but it's the one I was given." She should have been annoyed. Instead, she found herself smiling as she settled into leather seats that probably cost more than her monthly rent. They drove north, away from the restaurant district, and into neighborhoods where old money lived behind iron gates and manicured hedges. The houses grew larger, set farther back from the street, until Paolo turned onto a private drive that wound through grounds extensive enough to qualify as an estate. The house at the end was all clean lines and warm stone, modern architecture softened by climbing vines and careful landscaping. Lights glowed from tall windows, and Ginevra could see the flicker of what might have been a fireplace inside. "This is his home," she said, not quite a question. "Yes, signorina." Then he invited me to his home for a first date. Signor Vittore values privacy. Paolo pulled up to the front entrance, and he wanted you to feel comfortable asking questions you couldn't ask in public. That was actually thoughtful, surprisingly so. Dante appeared in the doorway before Paolo could open her door. He'd traded the suit for dark slacks and a white shirt with the sleeves rolled to his forearms. Somehow he looked even more dangerous this way, the casual elegance making him seem more rather than less controlled. Ginevra. He extended his hand to help her from the car, and she took it because refusing would have been childish. "Thank you for coming. Did I have a choice?" His smile was quick, sharp. "You always have a choice. You made this one." Fair enough. The interior of the house was exactly what she'd expected. Expensive, but not ostentatious. Decorated with the kind of art that suggested actual taste rather than hired designers. But it was the smell that caught her attention. Garlic, tomatoes, fresh bread, cooking smells, rich and genuine. "You cook?" she asked, unable to hide her surprise. "I do many things that might surprise you." Dante led her through the foyer into an open kitchen that would have made any chef weep with envy. "My mother insisted all her sons learn. She said any man who couldn't feed himself wasn't worth feeding. Smart woman. Terrifying woman." He said it with obvious affection. "Wine? Please." He poured from a bottle that had been breathing on the counter, and Ginevra accepted the glass with the growing suspicion that she was in over her head. "So," she said, watching him move around the kitchen with the same controlled grace he brought to everything, "you brought me to your home, you're cooking for me, and you've been a perfect gentleman so far. Should I be worried?" Dante looked up from whatever he was stirring on the stove. "About what?" "About whatever comes after the gentleman part." His expression went still. Then he set down the wooden spoon and crossed to where she stood by the kitchen island. He didn't touch her, but he was close enough that she could feel the heat of him, smell whatever cologne he wore mixed with garlic and wine. "I brought you here," he said quietly, "because I wanted to talk to you without an audience, because I wanted to know who Ginevra Castellano actually is, not who she pretends to be in boardrooms and restaurants where people are watching." He paused. "And because if I'm going to pursue you, and I am, I wanted you to understand exactly what that means." Her pulse kicked up. "Which is?" "That I don't do casual. I don't do temporary." His eyes held hers with that same intensity she remembered from Sorrentino's. "When I decide I want something, I'm thorough about acquiring it. I'm not a business acquisition. No, you're considerably more complicated than business." He reached out slowly, giving her time to move away, and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. The touch was brief, almost chaste, but it sent electricity down her spine. "You're smart, sharp-tongued. You grew up around men like me, so you know what questions not to ask. But you're here anyway, which means you're either very brave or very foolish. Maybe both," his smile returned. "I'm counting on it." He went back to cooking, and Ginevra took a long drink of wine to steady herself. This was insane. She barely knew this man. What she did know suggested he was exactly the kind of dangerous she should avoid. But when he plated pasta with the kind of care that suggested he actually enjoyed the process, when he asked about her work and listened to her answers like they mattered, when he refilled her wine glass without being asked and told stories about his mother that made her laugh, she found herself forgetting all the rational reasons to leave. They ate at the kitchen island rather than the formal dining room, and somehow that felt more intimate than any candlelit table. "Why me?" she asked eventually, when the wine had loosened her tongue enough to voice the question that had been circling her mind for days. "You could have anyone. Why chase a financial analyst who told you to leave her alone?" Dante set down his fork and studied her with that assessing gaze that saw too much. Because you told me to leave you alone. Because you looked at me like I was a problem to be solved, rather than a man to be impressed by. Because... He paused, and something shifted in his expression. Because I've spent 15 years building an empire, and I'm very good at it. But I'm tired of women who want the power and the money and the protection without actually wanting me. The honesty of it caught her off guard. And you think I want you? I think you're trying very hard not to. He leaned forward slightly. I think you came here tonight knowing exactly what I am, and you're still sitting in my kitchen drinking my wine. I think you're attracted to me, and it scares you, and you're too stubborn to run away from things that scare you. He wasn't wrong, any of it. What you are, she repeated carefully. You mean... I mean, I'm not a legitimate businessman, Ginevra. I mean, the restaurant is clean, but a lot of what I do isn't. I mean, if you're looking for safe and legal and respectable, you should leave now. His voice was steady, matter of fact. But if you're looking for someone who will see you, and value you, and protect you like you're the most precious thing in his world... He stopped. Then stay. The silence stretched between them, heavy with possibility. I should go, she said. Yes. This is a terrible idea. Probably. You're going to complicate my entire life. Definitely. Dante's smile was slow, dangerous. But you're not leaving. She wasn't. God help her, she wasn't. I have rules, she said instead. If we're doing this, whatever this is, I have rules. Tell me. I don't lie to my employer. I don't break the law, and I don't get involved in whatever it is you do. My career is mine. My choices are mine, and you don't get to manage my life the way you managed my dinner. Something like respect flickered in his eyes. Done. Just like that? Just like that. He stood and began clearing plates. I don't want to own you, Ginevra. I want you to choose me, every day, of your own free will. It was the right answer, the perfect answer, which made her suspicious. And what do you get out of this arrangement? Dante turned to face her fully, and the look in his eyes made her breath catch. You. In my home. In my life. Eventually. He stopped, seeming to choose his words carefully. Eventually, in my bed. But that's your choice too. Your timeline. What if I say no? Then I'll be disappointed. And I'll keep trying to change your mind. He crossed back to where she sat, and this time he did touch her, his hand cupping her jaw with surprising gentleness. But I won't force. Won't push beyond what you're ready for. That's not how this works. His thumb brushed across her cheekbone, and Ginevra's eyes fluttered closed for just a moment. When she opened them, Dante was watching her with an expression that promised he was keeping careful track of every response, every tell, every sign of what affected her. I should still go, she whispered. You should. But he didn't move his hand. Neither did she. Next Saturday, he said quietly. Dinner again. But this time, I'm taking you somewhere public first. Somewhere you can be seen with me. Because if we're doing this, Ginevra, everyone's going to know you're mine. The possessiveness should have alarmed her. Instead, it sent heat pooling low in her belly. I haven't agreed to be yours. Not yet. His smile was pure confidence. But you will. He was probably right. That was the terrifying part. When Paolo drove her home 20 minutes later, Ginevra's lips still tingled from the brief, devastating kiss Dante had pressed to them at the door. Nothing demanding, nothing aggressive. Just a promise of what could be, delivered with absolute certainty that she'd come back for more. Her phone buzzed as she walked into her apartment. Sleep well, Bella. Dream of me. She shouldn't respond, shouldn't encourage him. Shouldn't let him think he'd already won. Arrogant. Accurate. This time, she was smiling when she fell asleep. The third Saturday, Dante took her to the opera. Ginevra should have expected it. The Lyric Opera House was exactly the kind of place where Chicago's elite gathered to see and be seen. But she'd imagined dinner first, maybe drinks. Not stepping into the grand lobby in an emerald dress she'd spent too much money on, with Dante's hand at the small of her back, and what felt like every eye in the building turning to watch. "You did this on purpose," she murmured as they climbed the stairs to the box level. Did what? His voice was innocence itself, but his hand pressed slightly firmer against her spine. "Brought me somewhere I can't yell at you. I brought you somewhere beautiful to see something beautiful. If that happens to prevent yelling, it's a fortunate coincidence." She would have elbowed him if they hadn't been surrounded by Chicago's wealthiest families, all of whom were watching with undisguised interest as Dante Vittore escorted an unknown woman to what was apparently his private box. The box itself was perfect. Center position, second tier, with velvet seats and enough privacy to talk without being overheard, but enough visibility that everyone in the opera house could see exactly who occupied it. "You're making a statement," Ginevra said as they settled into their seats. "I'm taking a beautiful woman to the opera. You're showing everyone in this building that I'm with you." Dante turned to look at her fully, and something in his expression made her pulse quicken. "Yes, is that a problem?" It should have been. She'd spent 4 weeks now in this strange dance with him. Dinners at his home, a concert in Millennium Park, one memorable afternoon at the Art Institute where he'd surprised her by actually knowing the difference between Monet and Manet. But they'd kept it relatively private, quiet. This was different. This was Dante Vittore claiming her in front of everyone who mattered in his world. "I don't like being managed," she said carefully. "I know." He reached over and took her hand, his thumb tracing patterns on her palm that made it hard to think. "But I'm done pretending you're casual. I'm done acting like what I feel for you is something I can control or moderate or keep private." His voice dropped lower. "Everyone in this building is going to know your mind, Ginevra. If that's not what you want, tell me now." Her breath caught. "And if I say no, then I'll take you home, and I'll respect your choice." His eyes held hers. "But I'll be disappointed, because I think you want this as much as I do. You're just afraid to admit it." He wasn't wrong. She'd spent a month falling for this man, despite every rational instinct telling her it was dangerous, complicated, impossible. She'd spent a month learning that underneath the controlled exterior was someone who listened when she talked, who remembered details she'd mentioned in passing, who looked at her like she was the only person in the room even when they were surrounded by crowds. She'd spent a month pretending this could stay casual when they both knew it was anything but. "I'm not afraid," she lied. Dante's smile was slow, knowing. Liar. The lights dimmed before she could respond, and the orchestra began the overture to La Traviata. But Ginevra barely heard the music. She was too aware of Dante beside her, his hand still holding hers, his presence overwhelming even in the darkness. At intermission, he guided her out of the box with that same possessive hand at her back. The lobby was crowded with people drinking champagne and pretending to discuss the performance while actually gossiping about everyone around them. Ginevra felt the attention immediately. Curious glances, whispered conversations behind raised hands. One woman, blonde, beautiful, dripping with diamonds, stared with undisguised hostility. "Ex-girlfriend?" Ginevra asked quietly. "Business associate's wife. She has opinions about my personal life." "I'm getting that impression." They made it approximately 10 feet before the first interruption. A silver-haired man in an immaculate tuxedo stepped into their path with the kind of smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Dante, I didn't expect to see you here tonight." "Vincent." Dante's voice was cordial but cool. "I could say the same." "Yes, well," the wife insisted. Vincent's gaze slid to Ginevra with obvious assessment. And who is this lovely creature? Ginevra Castellano. She extended her hand before Dante could answer for her. I work in financial analysis. Castellano. Vincent's eyes sharpened with recognition. Any relation to the Boston Castellanos? Distant, she said, which was technically true and also a complete deflection. How interesting. And how did you meet our Dante? I told a waiter to leave me alone. Dante overheard and decided I needed rescuing. She smiled sweetly. Turned out the only person I needed rescuing from was him. Dante's hand tightened slightly at her back, but she could feel his amusement. Vincent laughed, though it sounded forced. Well, I hope you know what you're getting into, my dear. Dante has quite the reputation. So I've heard. Ginevra's smile didn't waver. Lucky for him, I'm not easily impressed. They extricated themselves after another minute of painful small talk, but it set the tone for the rest of intermission. Every few steps, someone else stopped them. Business associates, society wives, people whose names Ginevra recognized from the financial pages. All of them curious, all of them assessing, all of them making it clear that by being here with Dante, she'd stepped into a world that didn't forget and didn't forgive. You could have warned me, she said, when they finally escaped to a relatively quiet corner. Would you have come if I had? Probably not. That's not the point. Ginevra. He turned her to face him, and the look in his eyes was intense enough to make her forget they were in public. I told you, I'm done pretending. These people need to understand that you're not temporary. You're not casual. You're... Dante! The interruption came from a woman in her 60s, elegant in black silk, with sharp eyes and the kind of presence that suggested she was used to being obeyed. She swept toward them with the confidence of someone who owned whatever space she occupied. Behind her, looking uncomfortable in his tuxedo, was a younger man Ginevra recognized immediately. Marcus, her colleague, the man she'd been having dinner with the night she met Dante. Oh no. Mama. Dante's voice was carefully neutral. I didn't realize you'd be here tonight. Your father had a business dinner. I refused to miss Traviata. The woman's gaze fixed on Ginevra with laser focus. And you must be the girl my son has been so secretive about. Ginevra Castellano. She extended her hand, grateful for years of practice keeping her composure. It's a pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Vittore. Carmela, please. Mrs. Vittore makes me feel ancient. The handshake was firm, assessing. And this is my nephew, Marcus Romano, though I suspect you two already know each other. Marcus looked like he wanted the floor to open and swallow him. Ginevra. I didn't realize you and Dante were... He stopped, clearly unsure how to finish that sentence. Dating, Dante supplied, his voice flat. We're dating. The silence that followed was excruciating. Carmela's eyes moved between the three of them with obvious interest. How fascinating. Marcus, didn't you tell me you'd taken a colleague to dinner at Sorrentino's last month? Was that... Yes. Marcus's discomfort was palpable. That was Ginevra. Small world, Ginevra managed, though her mind was racing. Marcus was Dante's cousin. She'd been having dinner with Dante's cousin when Dante first approached her. This was a disaster. Very small, Carmela agreed, her tone suggesting she was enjoying this far too much. And how exactly did you two transition from colleagues having dinner to... She gestured vaguely at Dante's possessive stance. I saw something I wanted, Dante said, before Ginevra could answer. His hand slid around her waist, pulling her closer. I pursued it. Successfully. The claim was unmistakable, public, irreversible. Marcus's expression went carefully blank. I see. Do you? Dante's voice had an edge now. Because I want to be very clear, cousin. Ginevra is mine. Not a colleague. Not a casual date. Mine. Dante, Ginevra said quietly, warning in her voice. He ignored her. Anyone who doesn't understand that is going to have problems with me, family included. The tension was thick enough to cut. Around them, people were starting to notice, starting to watch. This was exactly the kind of scene that would be all over Chicago society pages by morning. Carmela looked between her son and nephew with sharp-eyed assessment. Well, this is certainly more entertaining than the opera. She turned to Ginevra. My dear, I think you and I need to have lunch. Soon. I have many questions. I'd like that, Ginevra heard herself say, though her heart was pounding. Excellent. Dante, give her my number. Carmela patted her son's cheek with obvious affection despite the tension. And try not to cause a scene in the lobby. Your father will hear about it, and he'll blame me for not raising you better. She swept away, leaving Marcus standing there looking miserable. I should go, he said finally. Marcus? Ginevra started, but Dante's hand tightened at her waist. Yes, you should. Dante's voice was cold. And cousin? Next time you're interested in a woman, maybe check if she's already taken. She wasn't taken when I took her to dinner. She was the moment I saw her. The possessiveness in his voice sent heat through Ginevra's body, even as her mind screamed that this was too much, too public, too claiming. Marcus left without another word. That was unnecessary, Ginevra said quietly. That was necessary. Dante turned her to face him fully, and the look in his eyes was fierce. He needed to understand. They all need to understand. You're mine, Ginevra. I'm not sharing. I'm not competing. I'm not pretending this is casual. You just claimed me in front of your mother and your cousin and half of Chicago's elite. Yes. You didn't ask if I wanted that. No. His hand came up to cup her face. Because if I'd asked, you would have said no. You would have wanted to keep this private. Keep it careful. Keep it safe. But I'm done with safe. I want everyone to know you're mine. I want my family to know. I want every man in this building to understand that if they look at you, they're disrespecting me. Her breath was coming faster now. That's incredibly possessive. Yes. And arrogant. Also yes. And you think I'm just going to accept it? Dante's smile was dangerous. I think you already have. I think you've been mine since the moment you told that waiter to leave you alone, and I decided you were the most interesting thing I'd seen in years. I think you're angry because I just made it public, but you're not angry because it's not true. He wasn't wrong. That was the terrifying part. Everyone's watching, she whispered. Good. He leaned closer, his mouth inches from hers. Let them watch. Let them see exactly who you belong to. I don't belong to anyone. Liar. And then he kissed her, not gently, not carefully. Not the kind of kiss you gave someone in public at the opera. This was claiming, possessive, deep enough that Ginevra forgot where they were, forgot who was watching, forgot everything except the taste of him, and the feel of his hand in her hair, and the way her body responded like it had been waiting for exactly this. When he finally pulled back, she was breathing hard, and the entire lobby had gone silent. Dante's smile was pure satisfaction. Now they know. Ginevra's face was burning. Every person in the lobby was staring. She could see phones out, probably already posting to social media. By tomorrow, everyone in Chicago would know that Ginevra Castellano belonged to Dante Vittore. I need air, she managed. She pushed past him and headed for the exit, her heels clicking on marble floors, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. Behind her, she heard Dante following, but she didn't stop until she reached the street outside. The cool night air hit her face like a slap. Ginevra. Dante's voice was closer than she expected. She spun to face him. You can't just claim me like that. You can't kiss me in front of everyone and announce I'm yours like I'm property. I know. Then why? Because I'm in love with you. The words were quiet, certain, devastating. Because I've been in love with you since you looked at me like I was an inconvenience at Sorrentino's. Because I'm tired of pretending this is something I can control or moderate or keep casual. He stepped closer. Because you're it for me, Ginevra. The only one. And I needed everyone to know it, including you. Her breath caught. You're in love with me. Yes. We've known each other a month. 5 weeks. And yes. That's insane. Probably. His smile was crooked, vulnerable in a way she'd never seen. But it's true anyway. Ginevra stared at him, her mind spinning. This was too fast, too intense, too public. Everything she'd been afraid of since the moment she accepted his first dinner invitation. And she was absolutely, completely, terrifyingly in love with him too. I can't do this, she whispered. Something flickered in his eyes. Can't or won't? I don't know. She wrapped her arms around herself. You just announced to everyone who matters in your world that I'm yours. You kissed me in front of your family. You claimed me like I'm something you own. And I don't know if I can be that for you. I don't know if I can be the woman everyone's going to expect now. Dante was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was careful. What do you want, Ginevra? I want to not feel like I'm drowning. I want to not feel like my entire life just changed in the space of a kiss. She looked up at him. I want to go home and think and figure out what this means without you looking at me like I'm the only thing that matters. You are the only thing that matters. That's the problem. Her voice broke slightly. Because I feel the same way, and it's terrifying. Understanding crossed his face. You're not saying no. You're saying slow down. I'm saying I need space to process that you just claimed me in front of half of Chicago without asking if I was ready for that. He nodded slowly. Okay. Okay? I'll give you space. Time to think. He stepped closer, and his hand came up to cup her face with heartbreaking gentleness. But Ginevra, I meant every word. You're mine. And when you're done thinking, when you're ready to admit you feel the same way, I'll be waiting. He pressed a kiss to her forehead, soft and sweet, and completely at odds with the possessive claiming from minutes before. Then he stepped back and gestured to where Paolo waited with the car. Go home. Think. But know this. I'm not giving up. I'm not walking away. I'm just giving you the space you need to catch up to what we both already know is true. Ginevra got into the car without another word, her mind spinning, her heart racing, her lips still tingling from his kiss. As Paolo pulled away from the curb, she looked back to see Dante still standing there, watching her leave with an expression that promised this wasn't over. Not even close. Her phone buzzed before they'd gone 2 blocks. I love you. That doesn't change just because you need time to accept it. She stared at the screen, her chest tight. She should be angry. Should be outraged at his presumption, his possessiveness, his public claiming. Instead, all she could think was that Dante Vittore loved her, and God help her, she loved him back. Ginevra lasted 3 days. 3 days of pretending to work while actually staring at spreadsheets without seeing them. 3 days of her phone lighting up with messages from Dante. Never pushy, never demanding, just small observations about his day that made her chest ache. 3 days of lying awake at night remembering the way he'd kissed her in front of everyone, the way he'd said he loved her like it was the simplest truth in the world. 3 days of knowing she was being a coward. On the 4th morning, her phone rang at 7. Not Dante, his mother. Ginevra, dear, this is Carmela Vittore. I believe I mentioned lunch. Ginevra sat up in bed, her heart already racing. Mrs. Vittore. Carmela, and I'm not taking no for an answer. Noon today. I'll text you the address. She hung up before Ginevra could respond. The restaurant was a small Italian place in Little Italy, the kind with red checkered tablecloths and the smell of garlic and tomatoes heavy in the air. Carmela was already seated when Ginevra arrived, looking elegant in cream silk despite the casual setting. You came, Carmela said with satisfaction. I wasn't sure you would. You didn't give me much choice. No, I didn't. Carmela gestured to the seat across from her. Sit. We need to talk about my son. Ginevra sat, her stomach in knots. He's been miserable, Carmela continued without preamble. 3 days of barely eating, snapping at everyone, locked in his office. His father wants to shoot him. I want to shoot him. But mostly I want to understand what happened at the opera that made you run. I didn't run. You ran, dear. I don't blame you. Dante can be overwhelming when he decides he wants something. Or someone. Carmela's gaze was sharp. But I also know my son. He doesn't do casual. He doesn't do temporary. When he commits, it's absolute. So if you're not interested, you need to tell him clearly. And if you are interested but scared, well, that's different. Ginevra's throat was tight. It's terrifying. Love usually is. Carmela's expression softened slightly. Especially with men like Dante. He's his father's son. Intense, possessive, absolutely certain when he knows what he wants. But he's also loyal beyond reason, protective to a fault, and once he loves you, he'll burn the world down before he lets anyone hurt you. That's what scares me. The intensity, the claiming. The way he looked at me like I was already his before I'd decided if I wanted to be. And have you decided? The question hung in the air between them. I'm in love with him, Ginevra admitted quietly. I've been in love with him since he showed up at my office with coffee and acted like it was completely normal to track down where I worked. But love isn't always enough. Not when it comes with this much visibility, this much pressure, this much everything. Carmela was quiet for a moment. My husband proposed to me after 2 weeks. Did Dante tell you that? Ginevra shook her head. 2 weeks. I thought he was insane. I told him no. I told him I needed time, needed space, needed to think about what it meant to marry into his world. Carmela smiled at the memory. He gave me 3 days. Then he showed up at my apartment with his mother and his sisters and announced he wasn't leaving until I said yes. That's incredibly presumptuous. That's the Vittore men. They don't do subtle, they don't do patient. When they know, they know. She leaned forward. But here's what matters, Ginevra. In 38 years of marriage, my husband has never once made me regret saying yes. He's infuriating and stubborn and far too used to getting his way. But he's also the best man I know, and Dante is exactly the same. How do you live with it? The intensity? The possessiveness? By being equally stubborn. By setting boundaries and holding them. By understanding that possessive doesn't mean controlling. Dante's father would die before he tried to control me. He wants to protect me, claim me, make sure everyone knows I'm his. But he also respects that I'm my own person with my own mind. Carmela's gaze was direct. The question isn't whether Dante is too intense. It's whether you're strong enough to match him. The words hit like a slap. Not cruel, just honest. I don't know if I am, Ginevra admitted. Yes, you do. You stood up to him at Sorrentino's. You've challenged him for 5 weeks. You told him you needed space, and he gave it to you even though it's killing him. Carmela smiled. You're exactly strong enough. You're just afraid to believe it. She wasn't wrong. He told me he loves me, Ginevra said quietly. I know. He told me too. Along with informing me that if you decided you didn't want him, he was moving to Antarctica to live with penguins because they were less complicated than women. Despite everything, Ginevra laughed. He did not say that. He absolutely did. My son, the dramatic. But Carmela's expression was fond. So, what are you going to do? Ginevra took a breath. I'm going to stop being a coward. Carmela's smile was brilliant. Good. Now finish your lunch. You'll need your strength. When you show up at his office, he's going to be insufferable. She wasn't wrong about that either. Dante's office was in a building downtown that screamed money and power. Ginevra had never been there before. All their dinners had been at his home or public places. But the security guard took one look at her and waved her through with a knowing smile that suggested Dante had left instructions. The elevator ride to the top floor felt like it took forever. His assistant, a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s, looked up when Ginevra stepped off the elevator. Ms. Castellano, he's in his office. Go right in. He's expecting me? He's been expecting you for 3 days. Go. Ginevra's heart was pounding as she opened the door. Dante was standing at the window, his back to her, phone pressed to his ear. I don't care what Vincent thinks. The deal is off the table unless he meets our terms. Non-negotiable. He paused. Then he can find another partner. I'm done playing games. He hung up and turned, and the expression on his face when he saw her made Ginevra's breath catch. Ginevra, your mother is terrifying. A smile flickered across his face. She called you. She summoned me. There's a difference. Ginevra stepped further into the office, her pulse racing. She told me you were planning to move to Antarctica. The penguins seemed less complicated than figuring out how to give you space, while also making it clear I'm not giving up. She also told me you've been miserable. I have been. He didn't move from the window, but his eyes tracked her every movement. 3 days of wondering if I pushed too hard, if I claimed you too publicly, if I scared you away permanently. You did push too hard. You did claim me too publicly. Ginevra stopped a few feet away from him. And you absolutely scared me. Something flickered in his expression. Past tense? I'm still scared. You're intense and possessive, and you announce to everyone who matters that I'm yours without asking if I was ready for that kind of visibility. She took a breath. But I'm also in love with you, and I'm tired of pretending that's not true. The silence that followed was deafening. Then Dante moved. 3 long strides and he was right in front of her, his hands coming up to frame her face with a gentleness that contradicted everything about his size and presence. Say that again. I'm in love with you. The words came easier the second time. I've been in love with you since you showed up at my office like a stalker with expensive taste in coffee. And I'm done fighting it. His kiss was everything. Relief and hunger and possession and something softer that made her chest ache. Ginevra melted into him, her hands fisting in his shirt, her body remembering exactly how perfectly they fit together. When he finally pulled back, they were both breathing hard. I love you, he said against her mouth. And I'm sorry I pushed too hard at the opera. I'm sorry I didn't ask before I claimed you in front of everyone. But I'm not sorry everyone knows you're mine, because you are. And I'm yours, completely. You're still incredibly possessive. Yes, is that a problem? Only if you think possessive means controlling. Understanding crossed his face. Never. You're your own person, Ginevra. Strong and smart and capable of making your own decisions. I don't want to control you. I just want everyone to know that if they hurt you, they answer to me. That's still possessive? Yes, but it's also true. His thumb traced her cheekbone. Can you live with that? I think I can live with a lot of things if you're the one asking. She smiled up at him. But Dante, next time you want to make a public declaration, maybe warn me first. Deal. His smile was slow, dangerous. Now come here. He kissed her again, deeper this time, walking her backward until her back hit his desk. Papers scattered, Something fell to the floor. Neither of them cared. "Your assistant," Ginevra managed between kisses, "knows not to interrupt." His mouth moved to her neck, finding the spot that made her gasp. "I've been waiting 3 days to touch you. I'm not stopping now." "We're in your office." "I know." His hands slid down to her hips, lifting her onto the desk. "Problem?" She should say yes, should be sensible, should suggest they wait until they were somewhere private. Instead, she pulled him closer. "Lock the door." His smile was pure satisfaction. They barely made it to his apartment. The car ride was an exercise in restraint, with Dante's hand on her thigh and Ginevra's pulse racing. Paolo drove with the kind of studied ignorance that suggested he'd seen this before. Inside, Dante backed her against the door the moment it closed. "I love you," he said against her mouth. "You mentioned that." "I'm going to keep mentioning it." His hands were already finding the zipper of her dress. "Every day, multiple times, until you're sick of hearing it. I'll never be sick of hearing it." The dress pooled at her feet. Dante's eyes went dark as he took her in. "Beautiful," he murmured. "Mine." "Yours," she agreed. He lifted her easily, carrying her toward the bedroom with the kind of confidence that should have been arrogant but was just honest. This was his territory, and she was his. The thought should have scared her. Instead, it made heat pool low in her belly. He laid her on the bed with surprising gentleness, then stood back to look at her. The intensity in his gaze made her shiver. "Come here," she said. "No, I want to look at you." His voice was rough. "I want to memorize every inch of you. I want to remember this moment when you stopped fighting and admitted you're mine." "Dante, stay still." The command sent heat through her. She stayed still. He undressed slowly, deliberately, his eyes never leaving hers. When he finally joined her on the bed, the first touch of skin against skin made them both groan. "I love you," he said again, his mouth finding hers. "Everything about you, your strength, your stubbornness, the way you challenge me, the way you look at me like I'm not terrifying. You're not terrifying. You're just intense." Same thing. His hand slid up her thigh. "Tell me what you want. You. All of you." His smile was fierce. "You have me. You've had me since the moment you told that waiter to leave you alone." What followed was claiming and possession, and something deeper that felt like coming home. Dante was demanding and gentle by turns, his hands and mouth mapping every inch of her skin, his voice rough with commands that made her tremble. "Look at me. Don't move. Mine. Always mine." When clothes disappeared and boundaries blurred, when his hands gripped her hips and her nails dug into his shoulders, when the world narrowed to just the two of them and the way they fit together, the scene faded to black. Ginevra woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows and a warm weight pinning her to the bed. It took a moment to remember where she was. Dante's apartment. Dante's bed. Dante's arm wrapped around her waist like he was afraid she'd disappear. She tried to move and immediately regretted it. Soreness made itself known in muscles she'd forgotten existed. Behind her, Dante stirred. "Where are you going?" "Nowhere. I just need to—" She stopped as his arm tightened. "Stay." His voice was rough with sleep. "Please." She relaxed back against him, and his mouth found her shoulder, pressing kisses to skin that felt oversensitive. "You marked me," she said, catching sight of her reflection in the mirror across the room. Dark bruises dotted her neck and collarbone, visible evidence of exactly what they'd done. "Yes." No apology in his voice. "Problem?" "I have work tomorrow. Wear your hair down." His hand slid up to trace one of the marks. "Or don't. Let everyone see. Let them know exactly who you belong to. You're impossible. You love me anyway. She did. God help her, she absolutely did. They stayed in bed until noon, talking and touching and learning the new landscape of being together without barriers. Dante was possessive even in tenderness, his hands constantly seeking her skin, his eyes tracking her every movement. But he also listened when she talked about needing to maintain her career, her independence, her life outside of being Dante Vittore's girlfriend. He didn't try to control or manage. He just held her and promised to support whatever she needed. It was exactly what Carmela had described: intensity without control, possession without ownership. 2 weeks later, Carmela insisted on family dinner. Ginevra dressed carefully, her stomach in knots despite Dante's reassurance that his family would love her. The marks on her neck had faded, but she wore her hair down anyway, suddenly self-conscious. "Stop worrying," Dante said, as they pulled up to his parents' home. "They already know you're it for me. This is just making it official." "That's not reassuring." His smile was quick. "They're going to love you, and if they don't, I don't care. You're mine regardless." The house was beautiful. Old money, elegant with warm touches that suggested actual family lived there. Inside, chaos reigned. Voices overlapped in rapid Italian and English, children ran through hallways, and the smell of cooking filled every room. Carmela appeared immediately, pulling Ginevra into a hug. "Finally. I was beginning to think Dante was hiding you. I've been working up my courage." "Smart girl." Carmela linked their arms. "Come, meet the family. Fair warning, they're loud and nosy and will ask inappropriate questions. Just tell them to mind their business. I do." The introductions were overwhelming. Dante's father, Antonio, was an older version of his son, with the same intense eyes and commanding presence. His sister Sophia was warm and funny. Her husband clearly adored her, and their 3 children treated Dante like a jungle gym. Various cousins and aunts and uncles filled the house, all of them loud and affectionate, and obviously curious about the woman Dante had claimed so publicly. Marcus was there too, looking uncomfortable until Ginevra pulled him aside. "We're good," she said quietly. "It was one dinner. Ancient history." "You're sure?" "Completely. Your family. That matters to Dante, which means it matters to me." His relief was obvious. "He's lucky to have you." "I'm lucky to have him." Dinner was exactly as chaotic as Carmela had promised. Conversations overlapped. Food was passed family style. Wine flowed freely. Dante kept his hand on Ginevra's thigh under the table, a constant reminder of his presence, his claim. But he also let her hold her own in conversation, let her challenge his father's opinions about financial markets, let her trade sarcastic comments with Sophia. He didn't try to manage or control. He just watched her with obvious pride and possession. Halfway through dessert, Antonio tapped his glass. "A toast," he announced, "to Ginevra, who has accomplished what we all thought impossible, making my son smile like an idiot." Laughter rippled around the table. "And to Dante," Antonio continued, his expression softening, "who finally found someone stubborn enough to match him." Glasses clinked. Ginevra's chest was tight with emotion. Under the table, Dante's hand squeezed hers. When she looked at him, the expression in his eyes was everything: love and possession and promise. This was her life now. This loud, chaotic, overwhelming family. This intense, possessive, impossible man. This feeling of being claimed and choosing to be claimed in equal measure. Later, after they'd escaped back to Dante's apartment, he pulled her close on the couch. "My mother cornered me in the kitchen," he said. "Asked when I'm planning to propose." Ginevra's heart skipped. "What did you tell her?" "That I'm giving you time to get used to the family before I make it permanent." His smile was crooked. "But Ginevra, I'm going to marry you. Maybe not tomorrow, Maybe not next month. But eventually, you're going to be Ginevra Vittore, and everyone's going to know you're mine forever. That's incredibly presumptuous. Yes. He kissed her softly. Problem? She thought about the last month. The intensity and the claiming and the way he'd crashed into her life and refused to leave. She thought about his family and the way they'd welcomed her, loud and warm and overwhelming. She thought about the way Dante looked at her, like she was the only thing that mattered. She thought about being scared and choosing him anyway. No, she said finally. No problem at all. His smile was brilliant. I love you. I love you too. And for the first time since he'd claimed her at the opera, Ginevra felt nothing but certainty. This was right. He was right. They were right. Everything else was just details. If you enjoyed Dante and Ginevra's story, subscribe to Mafia Tales for more dangerous romances where powerful men meet their match. Join our members area for exclusive extended scenes and early access to new stories.